Welcome to the United We Scan podcast, the podcast by rural carriers for rural carriers. The views expressed in this podcast are of the presenters and the presenters only and do not represent the views, opinions, or strategies of the United States Postal Service or the National Rural Letter Carriers Association. We ask that you please consult your assigned union representative for guidance in your local area. Please like this podcast, share with your fellow rural carriers, and subscribe to be notified each time a new episode is uploaded. Please leave a comment or question for us below. Thank you. Now, here are the hosts of the United We Scan podcast.
Welcome back, everybody.
You missed a great pre-show.
Wow. Okay.
Good reason for them to join our Discord is the pre-show.
Yes.
It's now time to close down the chat right now.
All right, guys, we are back again this week. For those of you who missed the pre-show, it was I have tears. Let's put it that way. All right, we are episode 99. We're going to talk a little bit more about this MOU that came out this past week and cover some more on grievances, I do believe. So on that note, Bill, how was your week?
Oh, it was tedious. Of course, we had the midweek, and that was fun. I've clocked in 1,102 responses to my posting, and I've gotten so many IMs that I stopped responding to them. I mean, my wife says, "Well, what are you doing?" And I said, "I'm responding to this IM." She goes, "Can you finish what you started?" And I'm like, "Oh, sorry, hold on." But I'm just like, overwhelmed by how pissed off the people are, and a number of them have really responded positively about getting involved and getting the delegates selected, finding out who these people are that we keep sending to the national convention year in and year out and changing it up, because that's the only way you're going to change this national board completely representing the craft is by changing the old heads that are on there and have been lodged in there until in eternity. And there's a rumor coming around, and I won't discuss it here, but we can discuss it after, in regards to another person coming back next year. And it's another old head. And it's like, no, we don't need any more of the same tripe from these people who have not carried a route in 20 plus years. I'm telling you, a lot of stuff has been, negative in regards to paying the money back. A lot of people have justified the money being paid back, in regards to the route adjustments. There is no justification for it. You screwed up, bite the bullet, because you have not paid us millions in hours above 57.36 for the past 6 years since the advent of Amazon. So suck it up, Buttercup, and kiss my ass. The national board should never considered this MOU in the first place. Had the grandbaby, had the grand dog all week. That was fun, and got our first snowfall on Friday morning. So winter's here. Buckle up, Buttercups. James, how about your week?
Well, until this MOU came out, it was a normal week. And when this MOU came out and I read it, I was already upset with it, because you are literally robbing 2 to 3 Peters to pay 1 Paul. You are stealing money from multiple carriers who got their routes cut, who deserve that money to support the carrier that bid on the newly formed regular route that was an aux route. And that's literally all this MOU is doing, besides holding routes from being cut for 52 weeks. That was the biggest part of it. But I got so upset at it, and so did a lot of carriers like Bill. I was receiving constant messages. I was receiving tons of input and support in terms of, after the midweek bonus episode announcing my candidacy for the presidency, that I created my own presidency campaign Facebook page. It is linked in our group chat, groups, the United We Scan podcast group, and my Rural Mail Carriers United group. And so if you guys want to help with that, support that, I'd greatly appreciate that. And then I just continued to work like I normally do. And then Friday rolls around and I get to one of my reload points and shut the truck off, go to restart it, and the alternator's not working anymore. I shut off all the electrical draws in the truck, didn't come back like it normally does, and called for a truck and had to wait half an hour for them to bring me a new truck. But that's how this job goes. Then this weekend came up and I was working on my laptop and the battery started going bad on me again. So I had to go out and buy a new laptop. Luckily, I found a very good deal on one. Being table 2 and all, Kristen knows exactly what it's like to search for a laptop or a computer that is within your budget capabilities and gives you enough processing power to do what you need to do. But I did really well on that. So hopefully we can turn around and make this union strong again. We're building a fighting NRLCA now. Like the NALC has the build a fighting NALCs, we're building a fighting NRLCA. So let's do that together. How was your week, Kristen?
Oh, my week wasn't too bad. Typical week for the most part. Amazon was late one day, so I went and ran a second trip. And I had 2 second trips this week, actually. One was for a misthrown package, got tossed to City Route. And then the other was Amazon came in late. And so looking at the size of the boxes when I got back off the road, I said, yeah, let me go run some of these because otherwise tomorrow I won't get everything in. So it was actually a good decision because the next day, yeah. And other than that, like I said, pretty normal week. I did find out that one of my customers is in hospice care right now, and unfortunate. And then the other one whose mail had been piling up, I'd always been, told her in the past that if it went, more than a few days, I'd bring it up to her and check on her. So she had medication in there. So Friday, I pulled her mail and went up to the door to check on her. Thankfully, she was fine. She's just having a lot of issues with getting out to the mailbox. And she, in the past, has not wanted a hardship. Well, her mind has changed now. So I will be dropping off the paperwork for her for a hardship tomorrow. But other than that, like I said, just pretty much a average week for me. Nothing major. So just one of those things. Yeah, I did field a lot of messages and my phone was blowing up a little bit too this week. But, we take it as we take them and talk people down when we have to. Or we uplift them when we have to.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, that was my week. Not too bad of a week.
I like the one message I got to give somebody a call. And I gave them a call, and, I don't know them personally. They're from out in the Midwest. And an hour and 47 minutes later, we ended the conversation. And I'm telling you, it's like hearing every horror story in all one episode. And I'm just like, God, this shit's got to change. It's really got to change. I mean, there's people with 30 years in saying, it's never been this bad before. It's not going to get any better. Not under this regime.
I know. I talked with a carrier for an hour or two on the same thing, and deciding whether they want to quit, pull their union dues, or what, and basically talking them off the ledge and trying to tell them that, hey, good things are coming on the horizon. We need to stick together. We need to band together. We need to take back our union from people who don't understand what it's like to be down here on the ground. They haven't ever scanned a package. They haven't ever dealt with Amazon, but they're making decisions for everybody that does.
I think the most disheartening thing, James, is the atmosphere in the offices. I mean, I sit there and just say, well, how many times do we have to tell people it can't mandate you to help on another route if you're a regular carrier?
Mm-hmm.
They can ask you. You can volunteer, but they can't mandate you. And these people are putting comments in there saying we're mandated by district. And after the 46th response in a week, I'm sitting there going, am I talking to the wall or something? Are they not getting the message? Are they not talking to their fellow carriers? in regards to this, because this is spelled out in the MOU. The same MOU that's going to take money off approximately 3,000 carriers. An MOU is a contractual agreement. It's a memorandum of understanding between two parties. It's legally binding, and it says specifically you must volunteer. Short, that's tough shit. Let the supervisors get out there and deliver it. Let them put clerks on it or city carriers. If you don't want to do it, okay, they can't force you. And if you're on your drop day, they specifically can't force you to do it then. And I've seen that 8 times this week. And I'm just like, ladies and gentlemen, please, read the contract, read the MOs that are out there. 603, the Elm. The carrier called me today at 9 o'clock this morning in my office because they have a medical condition. They're restricted to 8 hours work. It's an agreed upon time for the doctor and the post office. And now the post office wants to access him to other offices where he can do other work. And I said, well, what are they doing? Well, it's a 50-mile rule. I said, no, a 50-mile rule is specifically for RCAs or if you're accessing carriers. And since you're so far up in the seniority chart, you're not getting access before 12 other people. But they're trying to get this guy out the door, and he's not going to cooperate and is at the point where he is going to file an EEO, but he's not going to cooperate until he gets full, complete clearance from the doctors for his leg operation. Time he'll work his 8 hours. And this is all precipitated by the fact that political mail didn't get delivered on the other 2 hours of his route during the election cycle. It's not his problem. You have the right to manage. Mismanagement, you're good at it. You're trying to, hobble this carrier and threaten him into transferring him to outside offices. It's not going to happen. But this is the stuff that goes on. And in my office, we have a local steward and a former ADR, of which both are of no use. Thankfully, this gentleman was through this before when his leg was first operated on and won the case, and he'll go back and beat him again. But this is the stuff you have to know. You have to learn. I'm just so disheartened by, the continued harassment of our craft and the fact that the national board, the NSS, nobody is helping us.
Yeah, and we shouldn't have to be fighting this.
Yeah,
we shouldn't have to be fighting this. Management should be trained and know better. And at this point, I believe instead of them actually just not knowing it, I believe it is malicious, intentional, and unilateral, because it's been out there long enough that everybody should know it by now in management at the minimum. Carriers, I can understand some of them not knowing, but management, that's impossible. District managers know these things. Regional managers know these things. It should be all done. This came from the top down. And as we've seen, management in this agency is top down. They even admit to it in the UPMA magazine from August of 2024, where the national editor wrote an article titled "The Dilemma of Top-Down Decision Making," where they talk about postmasters, supervisors, MPOs, and even district managers have very little flexibility when it comes to making decisions. So that tells you right there that even the postmasters union, their association, recognizes that they aren't being able to make the decisions that best support their offices or their districts.
Yeah, they literally are there with a title, but hardly can ever make a decision for the office anymore on their own.
Oh, it's the typical, you have the responsibility, but you have no authority.
Mm-hmm.
Hello. and the worst part of it is that a lot of people, they have the authority, but they hold no responsibility. And they think that's their authority that they're entitled to make these statements and judgments that are in direct contravention to our contract, the general work principles, and just say, well, this is from district. We didn't sign a contract with district. We signed a national agreement. So you can take all that little pissant shit from district and blow it at your ass because of the fact that it holds no water.
All right, so let's get things going here. What did you want to bring up on this MOU again, James?
So I wanted to bring a little bit more information in on it with further research that we have done. The biggest thing that I want to tell people is this is, from all understanding that I have, only affects pay from October 19th on, from when the latest Rex evaluation went into effect. It doesn't affect people all the way back to April, as we had first assumed, considering the wording that they had used in the MOU itself. With having the management perspective, that gave us more clarity on the time frame that they have. So as it stands right now, it is currently 3 paychecks affected for those carriers that are getting cut or added to. It could be up to 4 or 5, depending on when they actually convert your route back to following this MOU. But it also affects relief carriers. It says in the MOU, those rural routes. So it doesn't matter if you are the regular on the route or the relief carrier on the route. It affects both of you. The only way a relief carrier does not get charged for this in any instance would be if they worked over 40 hours and went hourly. Then it would have no bearing on them. So I did some calculations, and this is literally yearly salary divided by 26 weeks at the gross amount. For table 2, step 1, anywhere from going from the 48 to 42 to 44K area, because that's about the range that they would put them to, would be anywhere from $290 a paycheck to $435 a paycheck. For table 1, step 12, same range, 42 to 44K from your 48, would be anywhere from $420 to $631. Now, this is a very rough calculation. Other factors may apply. These are just rough numbers off a simple calculation. But I wanted to put that out there as an idea.
James, they cut them to 43s, not 42s. 43 is the lowest they'll cut them to.
I know, but it's there just to give the range. And I do know carriers that get close to that number all the time. But that's just what my calculations were on that. And I just wanted to put it out there that it's not 5 or 6 years that they're going back, just to October 19th, for those that made comments about that.
It'll affect the leave replacements if they were under 40 hours for the week, so they were paid the evaluation. It would affect them. If they were over 40 hours, which kicked them into hourly with overtime, then they would not be affected.
And that was a sneaky little thing to slide in there. All affected carriers, because of the fact that it doesn't distinguish between career and non-career.
Yes.
I did hear through the grapevine that it may be November 30th when it goes into effect. Again, that was through the grapevine, so can't say yes or no that it'll be November 30th unless there's direct language for that. That was just what I heard through the grapevine.
And as always, take anything that we say or anybody else says with a grain of salt and do your own research. The best education you can get on this stuff is to look it up yourself.
Okay.
Pregnant pause.
Awkward silence. But yeah, it would make sense that they did it before the Christmas overtime period. Could you imagine how complicated that would get?
Yeah.
Well, they better get their asses in gear then, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
So yeah, I mean, it's roughly going to affect, I think I heard about 3,000 routes. So it's not widespread, but those 3,000 routes were fairly widespread. So, I mean, that's still 3 to 6,000 potential carriers that
That's
could possibly be affected in one way
that's
or another, going one way direction or the other.
that's
Actually
still.
more, because it could be the carriers themselves and the subs.
That's what I
Mhm.
said, 3 to 6
Yeah,
thousand.
I mean,
It
so
could be
you're
even more depending on if the carriers were the primary or not on the route, or if it was a different carrier each week. So it could be even more than that, and that's still 3,000 too many carriers. One carrier harmed by this alone is too many carriers. Taking money out of carriers' pockets is too many carriers affected.
amen to that.
Especially with how long it takes them to give back pay. They are so quick to issue a letter of demand, but we'll get to it when we get to it on paying carriers what they're rightfully owed.
Hmm.
Yeah.
My if I would have if this MOU was something that could not have been avoided at all, I would have at least said you cannot issue a letter of demand to the carriers until all carriers have been paid their back pay first.
This MOU should have never been considered ever.
Exactly. It never should have been signed, never should have been even implemented. There are other avenues that could have been taken in this situation to prevent routes from being cut a second time after the first cut.
Well, it doesn't say anything about being cut a second time.
Exactly. So you've opened the door for management to abuse carriers even more and didn't think of the implications of it when you signed it. This is exactly the problem that we have. We have short term gains for long term losses. We have hedge fund managers running systems here because that's how hedge funds work. They do short term gains for long term losses.
Well, I
Look at
mean,
any.
honestly, the one biggest way to avoid the pay adjustments and the letters of demand would have would have been being proactive and having a similar MOU go into effect when the route cut started, saying that they would need 52 weeks of data before they would be fully evaluated. Because for the sheer fact, and like I said in the midweek episode, they had already been telling us at all these conferences and conventions and whatnot that it's a good instance that good probability that the routes will go back up with the fall mini mail survey for the sheer fact of the 52-week data. So if they're already aware that this is the probability, why couldn't they have put an MOU together and gone to the post office themselves and said, hey, with this 52 weeks of data, there's a probability of these routes going back up or going back down. Why can't we put a stay on this now instead of, like I said, being proactive rather than reactive? But obviously that wasn't going to happen in this scenario.
Well,
That's my biggest problem with this, though. You have carriers out there that did this work for free to get to these evaluations, and now that they got to these evaluations, which allowed them to be cut, the continuation of that pay at that level is remittance for the work that they did the previous 52 weeks.
Hmm?
And now you've taken away that remittance pay from these carriers, two, three, four carriers, depending on how many routes you cut to bring that aux route up to a regular route. So that way, this one carrier would be back up to the regular standard of a route. We're right back at the 66% take a loss for 30% to gain. But carriers are now being paid more accurately for the work that they do.
not for the work they have done.
Mm-hmm.
And the disheartening thing about this is we're now in the 12th year of implementing Rex. And we have these 3 Nobel Prize winning engineers who have, thought this through. And yet we've had to make changes every single month of the year since the inception of it, since the first mini mail survey, because we changed standards. We changed you're no longer getting credit for the PARS labels. Unscannable parcels are, discretionary. Walking it to the door, scanning it once, and then leaving the scanner at the truck. Yeah, you got all these things that they didn't think about because you're fucking engineers and you're sitting at a desk and you're working probability tables on a computer. You should have had your ass out in the streets for a month at a time on all types of different routes to figure out what we actually do and how we do it.
If they would have just been transparent with the whole process and showed us everything, and on top of that, turned around and before we had the mini mail survey, did a standard mail count with the mini mail survey and showed us the numbers aligned with the mail count versus the mini mail survey, or the mini mail survey was ahead, carriers probably would have accepted it a lot better. But they don't think about what could actually be beneficial to the craft. They just think about what's beneficial for management. How much easier can we make it for management? Management doesn't even have to go out and do route inspections anymore. They can do it from a computer watching what your scanner does. They don't have to even get out of the office anymore. They can sit there and just do all the tasks that their district manager, their POOM, or whoever sends them to do all day long sitting in an air-conditioned office. Well, we have carriers that are out there at 110 degrees or negative 10 degrees.
You know what's real ironic about the situation is Ronnie Stutz, when we postponed that last September mini mail survey to start the system off, said specifically that they still hadn't received transparency from the post office on how the data was being collected. And they still went ahead and did the mini mail survey. You admit in print that they have no transparency and you went along with it anyway. If that's not complicity with the United States Postal Service, I don't know what is.
Yep. I know I had carriers in my office. One of them saw everything online and on Wednesday was asking about it. Another carrier, our H route, got all, I don't know, anxiety kicked in and got all scared. And I'm just like, it's not affecting anybody in this office. It's you have to remember it's and I kind of get it at the scenario because we do have one route that's a 4748K, and I kind of gave an example of what the MOU was talking about to say if this route had been cut and it went back up, this is what would happen. Or or the route that was, because it's a separate zip code, so an aux route that was spun off of it for it being cut, and it did this or did that, this is what, this is what it's about. And once I explained that to people, they were just like, oh, okay, so it's not affecting us. No, it's not affecting you. But luckily, I was able to put my office at bay.
Yeah. So, carriers that are going to get a letter of demand for this do have a right to file a grievance on it. And the grievance should be, did management have the right to issue this letter of demand? And I know carriers are having enough problems balancing their own budgets that management's trying to now balance the Postal Service budget problems on their back. But one of the things that you can do if they find that it is quote unquote accurate is to be on a payment plan. And I hate suggesting that any carrier pay back money to the Postal Service, but that is the last resort you have, is to try and limit the damages that you get. And I would try to find the least amount of money per paycheck you can pay back, because you need that money more than management does. You need that money more than the Postal Service does. And I would do everything in my power to find a way to limit the amount of damage you get.
Okay.
Would you guys agree?
Yep, I agree.
Yep.
But just be known, yes, everybody has a right to file a grievance on any letter of demand that they receive. Just know with this one, if the calculations are correct, it will not be waived. So,
because your national officers agreed to it.
All right,
Yeah.
Let's move on.
Yes, please.
Okay, so we're going to talk about more on grievances, but I kind of wanted to bring something up. Carrier that I talked to this week, who in the past has not been, they are not a local steward in their office. In the past, they did not stand up for themselves. They did not, it was a kind of do what they say, didn't know where to find the information. And let's just say this carrier now is standing up not only for themselves, but looking out for other carriers to the point where other carriers in the office are approaching them and asking them for information and so they can file on their own. All it takes is one person to step up and protect themselves and even just, to let management know, hey, you're supposed to be, it's supposed to be done this way. Here's the language for it. Here's, not even necessarily having to file a grievance in some circumstances, but at least pointing out the correct language to management. If there's a grievance, absolutely go and file it. If you're aggrieved, grieve, But just to see one person who normally in the past did not stand up for themselves, standing up for themselves, and not only themselves, but other carriers in the office, now other carriers are being motivated to stand up for themselves as well in this office. And I want to say kudos. That's all it takes. If you have one of those offices where nobody stands up, be that person that stands up, and others will start to follow.
Definitely. Once they see that you're with, representing the contract and representing yourself and not taking this shit anymore, it'll embolden them to do the same. Well, if she can do it, I can do it. If he can do it, I can do it. Lead by example.
Yes. I just want to say that was, they were having a rough day and they weren't sure on some things, so they just kind of needed somebody to talk to and kind of vent and kind of get their bearings again. So they called me and let me know of everything that was going on and what they've done and what was, else coming at them with other carriers approaching them, which management does not like either. And I said, oh, well, guess you're doing something right then. But yeah, it's like, take it, as a compliment that they are seeing the change and they want to be part of the change. And that's what you got to do.
Remember, if you're standing up for the contract in your office, just by yourself alone, you're standing up for that one portion of the contract is helping the rest of the carriers in your office. As they say, if not me, who? If not now, when? If you're not willing to do it, who else would be? Can you convince them to stand up for it? If not now, when are you going to take the step to protect the craft and protect yourself from it? Because everybody has the tools available to them to do this. And if you need help with that, reach out. We are more than willing to help point you in the right direction, because this craft has been walked on for way too long. Management does not respect the contract that their national managers signed with the union. These district managers could care less. They're quote unquote protected in their position unless enough comes down from the locals and to national. So it's got to come from both directions, from the locals sending up grievance settlements and national seeing those grievance settlements and coming down on the district for it. That's the only way to get district managers to actually pay attention to the contract and follow the contract. And I understand some people say we've had it too good for too long. Well, it's time for us to say that the time for us taking it is over. The time for us to stand up is now. Because if you don't stand up now, will you ever stand up? Will you ever be able to stand up?
So if you don't stand up now, you've lost that opportunity, and every opportunity lost is wasted, and it really just thickens the quagmire that you're in. You've got to start.
Because the more you let management get away with it, the more management's going to get away with it, and it's never going to get better. It'll just get worse.
You have tools available to you. You have the grievance form. You have the 1767 safety hazard form. You have union representation that is supposedly there to help you, and they should be. And if not, go above them. There is a chain you have to follow, but you can go above them. Everybody should be fighting for this craft, whether you are the national officer or the local carrier with no union capacity other than being a union member.
And you don't even have to be a union member to do that, James.
Yes. And being a union member, I'm meaning that everybody is a union member. Some are just dues paying, some are not. We all are required by federal law to be a union protected member of this craft, even if some people call them names.
Nobody would call them freeloaders and scabs, especially the president. I
Okay.
guess Kristen will cut that, won't she?
The
We'll see.
thing I really wanted to get into is what are some pitfalls in the grievance process that you guys know? Kristen, Bill, the grievance process, when carriers file a grievance, what are some of the biggest pitfalls that happen?
Let's start with the most obvious documentation. You know, whether it's actual printed documentation or it's getting a statement from a carrier near you, whether it's getting a signed document for a direct order. Documentation is the biggest pitfall, and not just for the carriers themselves, but also for their union representatives too. You know, the failure to document, you know, a situation or an incident, contractual violation, a safety violation, anything in regards to OSHA, in regards to your workplace environment. You know, if you fail to document, this is not a situation where you go into a grievance meeting and it's he said, she said. It's a matter of what you're bringing in that is provable evidence of the violation, and it has to be documented. My situation right now with this gentleman with his injury, his documentation is an agreement between his doctor and the post office. He's going to win the slam dunk because the fact that it's in black and white. But the fact of the matter is that if he just said, you know, well, my doctor said, well, that's not good enough. It has to be in writing from the doctor. It has to be agreed upon by the post office. So documentation, I think, is one of the biggest failures that a carrier or a local steward can overlook in regards to the importance of winning a grievance.
Absolutely. I was thinking the same thing was documentation. Even if it's a hostile environment where a supervisor is name calling or just verbally assaulting employees, document the date and the time and who said what and exactly what they said. And if you can get more carriers on board to make that documentation, the better it's going to stand. You can't just go in and file and say, oh, well, supervisor so-and-so was telling me to F off and leave it at that without any supporting, especially witness statements in this instance. And it comes back to that he said, she said. He said, she said it's going to go absolutely nowhere without supporting documentation.
Well, Kristen was there when they told me to fuck off. But then you go to Kristen and it's 3-4 days later and Kristen's thinking about it and she doesn't want to get involved. The day it happens is when you go approach that carrier and say, can I get a statement from you? And, you know, the comment in here about worried about repercussions. You know, you can't live in fear of repercussions because A, more times than not, they'll come. But B, that's their way of suppressing you and controlling you. If you don't stand up, it's going to keep happening.
I will tell you this.
I've explained this, James, to people. When it happens to Gary right next to you, and you don't stand up and say something, the next time when they come after you and you ask Gary to stand up for you, you know what Gary's going to say? No, because when I needed you, you weren't there. So each time, be a little braver than you normally are and do the right thing.
Yes, even if they're in their first 90 days. A probationary employee can grieve anything except for termination.
And I will say this with people in their 90 days, if you are a carrier who's outside of your probationary period and you hear a hostile situation going on next to you, guess what? That's hostile for you because it's going on to the carrier next to you. Now you're in fear of it happening to you. That makes it a hostile work environment. You can file a grievance for it creating a hostile feeling in yourself. Because what's to say it won't happen to you next?
Which makes it a class action grievance then.
Yes. and takes the risk of the probationary carrier out of the loop, takes the retaliation off that probationary carrier, and protects them as well. And guess what? After they get off probation and something happens, they're more likely to actually stand up with you when you file another grievance. The biggest thing any carrier can do is protect their brother or sister next to them from management. If management starts getting onto them and you hear it in your case next to you, walk over. Hey, do you need a witness to this? Those words alone usually get management to change their mind about what they're talking about. Usually. Not always, but usually.
And conversely, if you do that, the next time a situation comes up, that carrier will be emboldened to stand up for themselves as well as you, because they know somebody else has their back. And that's what this is all about, having each other's back. I don't care if you like that person or not. It's a matter of respect. It's a matter of workplace environment, and it's a matter of being united together to face this threat to our livelihood.
Another issue that comes up in grievances, especially, is the steward not knowing what will make you whole. We went over filling out the grievance and making a statement and things like that. But make sure your steward knows that, hey, this is what I want to make me feel like you've accomplished something. Whether it be cease and desist or a monetary financial incentive for them to stop doing it. But the biggest thing that you've got to do is explain your side in your statement and advise, hey, this would make me feel better about this situation. Dan stewards, your job when you go in there to fight this with management is to get that carrier that whole. And being a local steward, if you don't know what you can actually get them in compensation, you need to look at what would you want as compensation if it was you being affected by this. So, for instance, let's throw what happened in my office. When they turned around and weren't fueling my vehicle for Amazon Sundays. This was an old grievance I had a long time ago. Back then, I didn't actually know the proper procedure to file a grievance. I just filed one and worked with my ADR to file it. But what I wanted out of that was I wanted them to cease and desist allowing carriers to bring the trucks back without full tanks of fuel, and a financial incentive to prevent it from occurring again that also compensated me for the extra fueling I had to do that week. That's what would have made me whole. But in a hostile work environment, it's even harder because now you want to remove that manager from that office to prevent the hostile work environment. Or you want the management to cease and desist allowing certain things to occur, like maybe clerks treating carriers like garbage, or a supervisor treating carriers like garbage. And you want the postmaster to make the supervisor make statements on the floor regarding the joint statements on workplace violence and harassment. But as a steward, you want to get the best result for your carrier. No matter what it is, you've got to find a way to not only make the carrier whole, but prevent this situation from happening again in one way or another.
And I've always found that the language immediate cease and desist of this practice and a financial penalty for any future violations. I always like throwing that in there because of the fact that, when they sign that agreement, they're bound by that. And in 2018, I had a grievance settled in regards to people working off the clock. And as of 2024, I used it and got every carrier in our office paid $200, including city carriers, because the language said all carriers. It didn't say rural or city carriers. It said all carriers. And you want to talk about a pissed off postmaster?
Mm-hmm.
On a 4-year-old grievance,
Yep.
They had to pay out thousands to 88 carriers.
And it doesn't matter what manager signed it.
Nope.
If that grievance is a step one in that office, that grievance applies to that office. For every consecutive management member. If it's further up and it goes to district and it's settled there, it becomes a district-wide grievance. Where it settles affects the offices that are under that jurisdiction. So you could have a grievance that you filed 10, 15, 20 years ago that could still apply today, even though you've been through 2 or 3 managers.
At least.
At least.
I'll tell you,
But on the other,
we've gone through supervisors like we go through subs.
now the last thing I really wanted to get on with grievances is when you have a grievance settlement and management either does not make the payout on the settlement or management violates again. Now, a lot of carriers have gone and just continued to file the same grievance over and over and over. There's a problem with doing that. You're getting the same settlement for each of those grievances because you're not escalating the grievance. You're creating a paper trail of the grievance, but you're not escalating it. And the only way to escalate it is to file a failure to comply with a grievance settlement. Because now you are escalating it, because now not only did they do the violation again, but they also violated the grievance arbitration procedure. And that's an escalation.
The biggest one that I can think of off the top of my head, especially with this would fall in with failure to comply, would be those offices that file on management not doing the mapping with carriers. And then, it's settled for management will start mapping with the carriers on a monthly basis. And now your 1 month goes by, 2 months goes by, they haven't done that. That's a failure to comply. That's not another grievance of saying, hey, you're not doing my mapping. That is a failure to comply with the previous grievance.
And anybody who knows me on social media knows that when I write my grievances out, I always say, did management violate the national agreement or other postal documents when management unilaterally, means they made the decision by themselves to do it, intentionally, because they knew about it, had known about it, or it was in a file in the office available for them to look at, and maliciously, because they chose to do so with ill intent. And the ill intent was to cause harm to carriers. I use those 3 words most of the time because any decision where they violate a grievance settlement is unilateral because it goes against the contract, intentional because they should know to follow grievance settlements, and malicious because it causes harm to carriers. And anytime, especially on the mapping thing, when it's the same manager or 204B or supervisor, it is intentional because they knew about it. I always use those words because it adds more power to it. And I write grievances to go to arbitration because I don't know where the union is going to settle it. Will the union settle at step 1? I don't know. Will they settle at step 2? I don't know. Maybe it'll go to step 4. But maybe, just maybe, it'll be one of those very, 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 very lucky ones that ends up to go into arbitration where an arbitrator has to decide. And when you use those specific words, those are target words for arbitration.
Now, the follow up with Kristen on about the mapping. One of the things that you have to do is make sure the language is very specific, that the mapping is done at end of shift duties. Because I've seen the argument that a settlement's been made, there was no time frame in regards to when they do it. And they'll say, well, we didn't know it was supposed to be end of shift. We're doing it when, it's most convenient for us. It's not a matter of being convenient for you. It's a matter of being convenient to the contract. It's an end of shift duty.
And you can put that in the settlement of the first grievance that management will map with the carriers during end of shift duties monthly.
Right. Language, folks. Language.
Make sure for the stewards that are fighting these, make sure you put your language clear, concise, and finite. You don't leave open language like management may, management shall, management will. You use the word will is stronger than may. Management will cease and desist. Cease and desist is the strongest language you can use to go to arbitration.
It means it stops right now. Upon settlement, it stops right now. And ignorance of the law, just like ignorance of a grievance settlement, is not a very good case for management to preclude saying, "Oh, we didn't know. That's not my problem. That's yours."
And always remember, management will use every material available to them to nail you to the wall. It's up to us as carriers and our stewards to use every bit of material in existence to nail management to the wall like they do us. Treat them
Amen.
the way they treat us. And always remember, every grievance you file has a possibility of going to arbitration. Now, our leader, our national office will tell you, oh, we don't like arbitration because we only win 22% of the time. Every single arbitration has a 50-50 chance as soon as you walk through the door. And the only thing that gives you the cutting edge above that 50% is your preparation for arbitration. And if you aren't prepared for it, that's how you get 22% success rate. Preparing your grievances. Yeah, go ahead.
No, finish what you were going with.
Preparing your grievances at step 1 is the very first step. That is the ultimate point at which your grievance has a chance of making it through arbitration and winning. Getting the verbiage right, getting a settlement option right, putting everything together and having every article that matches your grievance on that grievance is the best chance you have. Because once you get to arbitration, there shouldn't be any introducing of new evidence. It should already be in your grievance.
Another grievance buster, I should say, or calls a grievance a failure, is the timeliness. A grievance has 14 days from either the time the incident happened or the time that they became aware. 14 days. So you can't just sit on it and then on that 15th, 16th day go, oh yeah, I want to file a grievance on this. You have 14 days for a grievant to initiate that grievance. That includes discipline, that includes contractual, 14 days for a grievant to file that grievance.
And issues that come up sometimes can be month-long issues. So, for instance, we'll go with the mapping thing. You go and you tell management, hey, we got to do mapping. And they go, well, I'm not going to be able to do that. You tell them that on the 24th, you have 14 days from the 24th to file that grievance. But if it happens and he says, okay, I'll get to it. It comes to the 31st, he doesn't do it. He goes, I'm sorry, I couldn't schedule it in time. I had all this stuff come up. We'll do it in the next few days. That's another official discussion with management over your grievance. You got to make sure that you have your timeline right for the 14 days.
And don't fall for the fact that a supervisor sits there and says, like in my case, we only have one rural supervisor and 3 city supervisors. Well, I can't sign that. I'm not a rural supervisor. You are a supervisor. You're representing management. You are required to sign this. Yeah. Whether you are a rural or city supervisor has no bearing whatsoever on the filing of the grievance.
And they're not signing it to agree to it. They're signing it to say you filed it timely. And they can get it themselves to the right person, to the right manager.
Right.
And if they're not willing to get you in PS Form 8191, that's another grievance. Management is supposed to supply your grievance forms for you. And if they're not letting you file it at that point, they're not willing to accept it, you can file a grievance for that as well. Bury them in paperwork. What do we do, Bill?
File, and smile.
Anything else, guys?
Kristen had a comment there. Well, she did.
Kristen?
I always like I always liked my office. There was an asshole steward in there that had one of those little plastic hanging files on the end of his case with 100 copies of grievances in there.
Yeah, I've got a half a dozen copies of grievance forms at my case as well.
I do too, but I still make management give me one.
Oh, of course. And if they refuse, well, I've got backup, and now instead of one, you're getting two.
Mm-hmm.
I'll file, and smile.
Absolutely.
And I do not keep my copies of grievance settlements for my grievances at the office because they somehow have a tendency to disappear. I have a file at home for my grievances, and every carrier should have a file at home for their grievances, so that way management can't make them disappear. You always have a copy of them.
Yeah, they tend to grow legs and walk away when you're out on your route.
There was even a manager that got fired in arbitration for throwing out the carrier's steward bag and all their paperwork.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm. It took arbitration to get that manager fired, and it seems that's about it to get management fired. Is it has to go to arbitration lately, unless they're stealing from the post office.
And then they just move them to another post office.
No, if the postal inspectors catch them, they're gone. But if they're caught by the union, they're just moved to another office.
We had a city carrier that had a postal credit card. Was using it to buy lunches, which is technically theft. And they removed them. A 30-day suspension without pay. Then he got reassigned to another office 30 miles away, and was basically not ever allowed to again possess a credit card. He had to know somebody.
Yeah, that's never a good thing for anybody.
No. Mm-mm.
All right, guys. Anything else for this evening?
Pretty much what I had on the agenda.
Yeah,
Next-
sounds good.
Next episodes are 100th, so we got to really prepare for that one, have a good celebration for that. So hopefully people will join us on our Discord server for the celebration. Sure to be a blast. You can get that on our Facebook group. We have a link for the Discord on there. And if you do need help getting there, we have plenty of people on the group page to assist you in figuring that out if you need it.
I think we are, as it'll be starting a few days, so next Sunday, we're going to go over the Christmas overtime. That's always a fun one. Along with it being the 100th episode, we'll see what else we get planned, but we'll definitely start out with going over Christmas overtime, as that will be starting 6 days later. So definitely,
This is going to be a sad Christmas for me.
yeah.
I have
Yeah,
to
you're
use
gonna
my
have to
own money
go.
for Christmas presents.
You're gonna have to go visit all your customers and wish them a Merry Christmas, Bill.
Oh, don't worry about
Maybe.
crown gifts. I got enough crown gifts for the next 24 months.
Bill needs
That
to
means
wear
a
a Santa
bottle a
suit.
month, man. Let me tell you.
Bill needs to wear a Santa suit.
No, not a Santa suit, a Santa thong. To show up with a hat, a white beard, black boots, and a thong. Don't nobody ever come up with a picture with like that, okay? I don't want to see that.
Someone needs to Photoshop Bill's head on that picture, please.
Yeah.
All right, guys. So, parting words there, James.
This MOU is gonna be a bane for a lot of carriers continuing on. For the carriers that have worked their butts off for years and years for free, get their routes cut after this MOU has been signed, and they'll still be working for free for the time that their route was over 48 after they've been cut. And grievances have to be filed timely. Make sure you're doing it the right way. Get assistance if you need it. Contact your designated union representative. They're supposed to be able to guide you on that. They can't solicit a grievance, but they can help you when you tell them, I wish to file a grievance on this. They're supposed to help you. Get with them, get help. Make sure you're taking care of your fellow brothers and sisters, because you are the best part of the rural craft. Every single rural carrier out there working their job daily is the best part of this craft. And filing grievance is one way to show management we're all in this together. Bill?
I have to say that this MOU has really rankled my butt because of the fact that, like James said, we've got overburdened routes that are working 60 plus hours and that have not been compensated. I personally have been an overburdened route for 6 years. Never got paid more than a 48K, and yet the post office found a way to bleed carriers even more. And the short sightedness by the post office, our union, and these engineers is the cause of this situation. There is not a carrier in our entire craft that should pay back one stinking penny. And I'm embarrassed that the national board signed this MOU, let alone considered it. And it's an embarrassment that we have to bear the brunt of their short-sightedness. God bless you all. You're going to have a semi-short week here with Thanksgiving, but then you're going to get pounded on Friday as usual. Everybody, just, what's coming. So, as Josh would say, step back, take a deep breath, step back in. But, enjoy Thanksgiving, not for the meal itself, but for the people there that you're sharing it with. And enjoy the company of your family and friends. You got Friday and Saturday are going to be hell, but you already know that. So we're tough. Just be careful, be safe. Winter weather's moving in. Remember, you are the most important delivery of the day. Get home to your loved ones. Kristen?
Thank you, guys. Yeah, definitely stay safe. Everybody enjoy their Thanksgiving, their times with their families, their loved ones, their friends. Whoever your extended family is that you'll be spending time with for Thanksgiving, please enjoy that. Be safe doing that. When you leave Friday morning for work, make sure you kiss your loved ones goodbye because we won't be seeing them again until after New Year's. I reminded the other half of that this morning, and he just rolled his eyes at me and said, yeah, I know. But on that note, guys, stay safe out there. Take cautions with as the weather's getting colder in many areas. And that unloved four-letter S word makes its appearance, which it has in some areas already. But stay safe, and we'll be back next week for our 100th episode.
Happy Thanksgiving, everybody.
Hey, everybody. It's episode 99. Kristen, where'd you go?
Bill cannot hear me, obviously.